moderator this evening is Andrea Greenspan, an image and brand consultant based here in South Florida. Andrea is a nationally known fashion and style expert. She has appeared on numerous television shows including Oprah, The Today Show, CNN, and CBS This Morning. She has also been quoted in numerous periodicals including Entrepreneur, Parade, and Crain's New York. Since 1984, she has worked with many corporate, association, and professional clients, including household names like American Express, MTV, Godiva, Esquire, MasterCard, and Northern Trust. Andrea's specialty is cohesive and integrated branding and image presentation. As we are going to learn this evening, this specialty also extends to the individual level, and that means you and me. Our panelists. Our panelists this evening include the following professionals and firms in South Florida. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mention your name and firm, and then when we're finished, each of you will have a chance to tell the audience a little bit more about yourself, what you do, the types of people that you may hire. We have Mariam Mohajer. She is from Robert Half Accounting and Finance, based in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We have Christopher Morgan, CFA, Macquarie Securities, Miami, Florida. Christina Worley, CFA, CFP, CPA, PFS, Castle Wealth Management, West Palm Beach, Florida. Laura Clement, CFA, GQG Partners, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And Justin Govonlu, CFA, Affiliated Managers Group, West Palm Beach, Florida. So now each panelist is invited to introduce themselves, and there should be a microphone. If you'd like to lead off, Miriam, go right ahead.
I may rather not, but yes. Unfortunately, I don't have anything more exciting to share about myself. I can tell you about Robert Half. We're the largest and the oldest specialized firm in accounting and finance recruiting, and we're the largest in South Florida for sure. We help all businesses of all sizes with their recruiting needs, and we place professionals from part-time and temporary to full-time, and we have 4 different divisions in our office in West Palm. We have accountants that help professionals in accounting and finance who are not currently employed and are looking for temporary positions, and then we have Robert Half Finance and Accounting, which is my division, and it's me and my 3 other co-workers. They're all CFAs, and I'm the only one in finance, and we place people on a permanent basis, and we have management resources, which helps professionals with management background, and like CFOs and controllers who are not currently working but are looking for positions on a project basis and consulting jobs. And we also have office team that works with businesses for admin and those kind of positions. And my general responsibilities include pre-screening, finding the candidates, pre-screening, doing phone interviews to in-person interviews. I do background check, I do reference check, I do everything. I find the right position for them, I prep them for the interviews, I give them the feedback after the interviews, and then hopefully I get the position they want, and that'll be all. I don't have anything else to say.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming today. My name is Chris Morgan. I work with Macquarie. It's an international bank headquartered in Sydney, Australia. They're one of the largest banks over there with a growing presence in the United States. I'm an equity research associate analyst covering utility stocks, and that involves, because we cover, my team, there's a senior analyst and then myself and then a second associate analyst. As a team, we cover about 35 stocks, and because of that, I've been with the firm for about a year now. Some of those stocks I'm taking through the full publishing cycle now, where, for example, an earnings report comes out, I go in the model, update the estimates, speak with the CEO of the company, and then publish a note overnight, and then speak with the clients, hedge fund clients, pension fund managers, mutual fund active managers, and whatnot in the morning. There's some traveling involved. I get to visit company headquarters and whatnot. It's long hours, but I'm really passionate about what I do. I love analyzing, valuing individual securities and whatnot. I earned the CFA designation in 2016, which really helped accelerate my career, as we'll talk a little bit more about further in the presentation. But thanks again for coming tonight.
Hi everyone, my name is Laura Clement. I'm Director of Client Services at GQG Partners. I have 7 years of investment experience and I've been a CFA charter holder since 2015. GQG Partners was founded in June of 2016 by Rajiv Jain. He was the former CEO and CIO of Vontobel Asset Management, where he managed around $50 billion when he left the firm. He founded GQG in Fort Lauderdale. We're a long-only equity manager managing 3 strategies: global, emerging markets, and international equities for around $12 billion at the end of February. I am director of the client services team, so we manage all of the client onboarding, any data requests that come into the group, DDQs and RFPs. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the search process for asset managers. And any other general inquiries that might hit the firm. When I joined the firm in June of last year, I was the 30th employee, and as of the end of February, we had 43 employees, so we're actively recruiting in South Florida. We're hiring, obviously, on the investment team. We have a research mosaic of analysts, and so that's more of I would say the recruitment process is a little bit different. We're looking for high quality talent. We are also hiring in operations and legal. Compliance is a key area where we're looking for recruits. Marketing, digital marketing is a big theme that we see, websites and social media. And then in the sales and marketing department, as compliance grows, looking for people to review the material that we're sending out, and generally coordinate the sales efforts that we have down here. I'm excited about being a part of GQG because I think the growth opportunity is excellent, and I'm looking forward to see where that goes.
Hi, my name's Justin Govanlu. I'm with Affiliated Managers Group, also known as AMG. We're up in West Palm Beach. I am a vice president in the Affiliate Development Group. So for context, probably first, AMG's business model is to buy ownership stakes in boutique asset managers. So the way I describe it to non-finance people is it's kind of like Shark Tank, but we're only talking to, on the other side of the table, are people who own asset management firms and are looking to partner with someone who can bring, we're partially a capital provider, so we'll buy a stake in your business in exchange for a piece of your revenue in the future. We can help you grow, we can bring relationships, not like Mark Cuban, but we have some relationships. You can't sell your items at the Mavericks games, but and so that was the start of the business model. We've now built up such that we reinvest the cash flow we get from those investments in subsequent investments. We're now at about 40 firms who cumulatively manage $800 billion across everything from equities, fixed income, alternative investments, hedge funds, private equity. So it runs the full gamut. So I'm a vice president in the Affiliate Development Group. So our group is kind of the part of the business that interfaces with the managers themselves and tends to all the strategic matters that kind of come up on a day-to-day basis, as well as doing due diligence on subsequent investments we make in firms. There's tons of restructurings and acquisition opportunities that we're looking at all the time. So I've been in South Florida for 2.5 years. Prior to that, I was in our Boston office for about 6.5 years. I've been a CFA charter holder since 2010, so that means I have grown to enjoy Memorial Day again for about 7 years. It used to be kind of one of the most frustrating times of the year inside with the study books, but once you get past that, Memorial Day will be there again. So the types of people we're trying to hire for, so I think generally, across the business, we're looking to grow down here. We're at about 25 heads down in the West Palm office. We have, a couple hundred around the globe. We're growing a little more slowly down here than the other offices, but we're certainly have probably had a dozen or so new hires in the last year or two that I've been here. Analytical people, you need to, everyone will work in Excel, so that's still the language of finance, despite all the advances in technology today. You can't get away from being in Excel and being able to build and modify and reconcile data in Excel. So analytical mindset, I think well-rounded people as well. It's also a people business at the end of the day. So, a good colleague and a good, just kind of a well-rounded person with a lot of good interests and ability to get along with people. I'm personally excited about, there's so many changes in the asset management business. I mean, whether it's new asset classes and new ways to build portfolios, threat from passive and fee rates, and having to kind of get ahead of those changes. I think it's always changing. It's not a stagnant place. So, you pick up the Wall Street Journal and everything going on is affecting your business. So I think that's a cool thing, and that is me.
Thank you. I'm Christina Worley, and my firm I founded 20 years ago when I moved down to Florida. It's Castle Wealth Management. It's a boutique private wealth firm, and I'm here to kind of give the plug for the fact that you can also be entrepreneurial and open your own firm once you have a little bit of experience. So right now we have a little over 250 million under management. We have 10 people in the firm. Right now 4 are CFA charter holders, and we value the skills and the experience that they all bring to our boutique client service format. I became a member of the CFA Society back when I passed level 1 in 2001, long time ago, and then I did what many women do, which is take a little bit of time off to concentrate on work and their family. And I only passed level 3 and became a charter holder in 2015. And just so you understand how this all works, I'm actually the president of the CFA Society this year. So women, there's a lot of opportunity, and I stepped up when they needed a president filled for the trained one that had done his year of training as the vice president, then found out he was having twins at the last minute, and his wife and he decided that he could not also be president the same year. They were having twins and a 2-year-old, and so I stepped in, and I have enjoyed being president, and this is another way that you can learn and network with the other charter holders in the area, and the CFA Institute gives you a lot of training for board positions in communications and presenting well and networking, and it's a wonderful organization. So I appreciate you all attending, and I hope you all become members of our local society.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for your introductions. Now, please give a warm welcome to our moderator for the evening, Andrea Greenspan.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here. I got to know a lot, or as much as I possibly could in a week, about CFA, and it's quite amazing what you all have in store for you if you are members or are becoming members. I want to thank specifically Christina for pulling me into this, and it's really kind of exciting. And I also want to thank Stephen, who just returned, and Ursula, I'm not sure if she's here, for getting me up to speed for this evening. So the way this is going to work tonight, I'm going to do a little introduction, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, about what the value and even what is image consulting, why you should be concerned about your image, and how you can use it as a tool for advancement in your careers and your personal life. And then what I'll do is I'll turn to the Q&A for the panelists, and I will revisit some of the issues that I brought up in the presentation I'm about to make so that we can delve a little deeper and see how they actually apply to your lives. I will welcome any Q&A at the end, or if you feel you must interrupt, it's casual, we're a group, and it's here with a learning experience for all of us. So with that, we have a little technical difficulty. Our remote program isn't working, so let me just make sure. So tonight we're talking about career development in terms of how you can shape your image to transform your career. You've all heard, I'm sure, a little bit about how you dress to the next job when you're getting dressed, and we'll hit on that as we go. Wow. So as you can see, that's me. And the reason that I became an image consultant was because I was essentially born into it. I was born into a family that ran a women's specialty shop in a small town in Pennsylvania. And from a very early age, playtime for me was going to the store, watching how the salespeople interacted, the service aspect, the communication, actually the intimacy that they had with their clients, to understand who they were and how they related to this small but very active environment that was our community. And I also would go to 7th Avenue, which was then the fashion capital, and go on buying trips and fashion shows, and it was amazing for me. It really always seemed exciting. And yet, when I went to college, I studied dance, and I then moved on into University of Pennsylvania, where I studied American civilization. And they sound like they're very different, but in fact they're not, because both dance and AmCiv, you're taught to look at things, and you're taught to respect what is the essence of something, and not try to change it, but appreciate it. So in dance, if one's performing, and I hope you all go see dance performances, because they really are quite neat, and there's a lot of variety. The truth of a performer's performance is way beyond his or her technical skill. Like, you can be a great technician, as you can all be in your fields, but if you don't have the passion behind it, if you're not being truly honest about what you're doing, that will show. And the difference between wonderful and a virtuoso performance, and that is really that connection to the music, to the choreography, to the storyline, and to the passion of the dance. When it comes to AmCiv, we would study all different kinds of folklore, and whether it was folk stories, or folk music, or folk art, and that was the approach that I took. And what we learned was, let's appreciate and enhance each of these different subcultures within what is the America. So I came away from those two things with a very big, I guess my whole perspective was looking at things. And there was a famous dance critic named Denby, and he said that if you're to train your eye, you must look at everything around you. I'm paraphrasing. You must look at all the buildings in the street. You must not just walk down the street, but actually take the time to look at the architecture, look at the relationship between the buildings on a street in a given area. Like if you've ever driven into New York City from LaGuardia Airport, and you see that amazing skyscraper view. And to me, it always looks like a Lego town. I can't believe that it's alive. And then when you get in it, it changes completely. And there are lots of little specific neighborhoods. So the point of what I'm making here is, today we're going to learn to not just look at others, but look at ourselves and respect what we have, what we bring to the table, and learn how to enhance it and appreciate it, rather than fight it. So, I'm going backwards. Oh, one thing you'll notice here, I hope, is that when you look at this card, which is my card, which is the front of my website, the branding part of things, everything about that is integrated into what my true colors are. So what you're seeing looks, I hope, very organic in the sense that it all kind of looks like me. And I will describe that a little further when I go on, so just keep that in mind. So Maya Angelou said, the first time someone shows you who they are, believe them. I think we can all imagine a situation where we've walked into a room and put our hand out and you got that kind of hello. And then from there on in, you were kind of wondering really what the core, the soul was of that person. It goes for also how you look. And there are lots of things that happen when you walk in a room that you need to prepare for ahead of time, whether it's an interview, whether it's a meeting with a client, whether it's a meeting with a superior or a colleague. The mirror. How many of you have a full-length mirror in your home? How many of you are scared to use it? Or how many use it as a tool? I like to say, and this is kind of off color, but I don't mean it that way, that every day we go from our birthday suit to our business suit, whatever that business suit is. And we have to make a choice. We have to confront all kinds of things before we make that transition. And being honest with oneself, that enhancing oneself aspect I talked about before, is critical when you confront yourself and you go through that transition. The other thing that's critical is being really appreciative of the environment you're going into and knowing about the word appropriateness. It's something that seems to have fallen out a lot, certainly with millennials. We'll hear about how they come to meetings unprepared in terms of how they appear and their overall presence. So it makes a difference. So the mirror is a big deal. Who we are is really a composite. I drew this diagram to show you that we are not just one thing. We are not just the form or mass of our bodies, the color of our hair. We start with the genetics of our family, which color a lot of who we are. We add the color and the form that we get from that union. We integrate things like our interests, culture, our habits, and any kind of influence from the media that affect how we see ourselves and the world around us. When you mix all that together, you come out with you, and you should be a star, always. Think of yourself as a star, so I use that intentionally. You know, sometimes you look in the mirror, and I said I was a dancer, and I had to dial it back a bit, because my goal was always to, like, you know, I gotta dance, you know, I wanted to be on Broadway. But that doesn't always work. You can't always be the star in that respect, and you have to know how to modulate who you are for different settings. So I don't know if any of you have seen this before, but 55% of your appearance affects your first impression. So when you walk in the room and you saw me, I hadn't said anything yet. I certainly hadn't heard my voice. So all you could rely on was what I looked like. And you all have an opinion, you probably all have an opinion, not necessarily intentionally, just sort of organically, biologically. It's that fight or flight issue. You walk in a room and we are trained to figure it out really quickly. You know, am I looking you in the eye? Am I put together in a way that there's nothing that's making you wonder why? It happens in 5 seconds. Some say even in 3 seconds that happens. So when you think about that and the impact that you have, everybody has it. Whether they like it or not, you can't escape it. So it's your job to understand that, enhance it, appreciate it, and make it work for you in all different kinds of settings. The next thing is the 38% of your voice affects how people form an opinion. So if I were talking like this, I was like, oh my God, this is really so great to be here, you would not want to hear a thing I'm saying. And as you noticed, I lowered my voice on purpose. Because even though I'm a female, if you lower your voice, like when you're training a dog, if you want them to listen, you lower your voice. If you want them to play, you go, hi, let's go throw a ball. And they react differently. We're no different. I'm not saying we're dogs, but we're no different. So the last significant portion, believe it or not, and this is kind of surprising, are the actual words that you say. 7% of your impression is coming just from the content of what you say. Now that sounds flip-floppy here. We're talking about getting the great charter, right? We're talking about becoming better at our jobs and making sure we give the best advice to our clients, best information to our associates. And I'm not discrediting that, because clearly if I had nothing to say, I wouldn't want to be up here right now. But the point of this is you can't get to the value of those points that you're making in the words you're using unless you've managed that big thing called your appearance and your action. And that goes not just as you dress, and I'm going to walk out here, let you see me, I'm not hiding. This was very intentional. You didn't know me, so I had to say, okay, how can I be me, using the colors I use and my own little sense of style and deal with my body type and blah, 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 but be appropriate for the setting, right? You all are in finance or in the field of, so I need to wear a tailored dress. It was very intentional. The length of the dress was very intentional. The choice of the shoes was very intentional. They weren't high fashion shoes, you know, what kind of jewelry. Every single thing that went into this outfit was totally intentional with an eye to making a pleasant impression to you, yet being honest with myself. And feeling comfortable, that's critical. So if I didn't make the right, or if I'm not making the right impression, I don't know, you could care less what I'm gonna say. You'd already discount me, discredit me, and that would be it. So I'm going to help you focus on the 55%. I can't help you get your charter membership. I can't help you specifically. I'm not an economic person, although we'll get to some economics. The cane. So that's something that might mean a lot of different things to people. It may make you think of your grandfather. It may make you think of recovering from a sports accident. For me, it represents my mother-in-law. As I mentioned, the impression we make and how we feel about ourselves is really important. So I'll tell you a little story. I had meningitis in 2011, right after 9/11. 2001, right after 9/11. And I had what I call the meningitis diet. You know, we're always looking to lose that 5 to 7 pounds that we can't get rid of. Well, it left really quickly. And I felt great. I mean, once I recovered. And so I was like, this is great. I can wear my, different clothing, and I'm really feeling great. So I had gone out one night with my kids and my husband and my mother-in-law, who used a cane, and she managed to take that cane and tap me on my backside and say to me, I thought you were trying to lose weight. Okay? So it's really, I'm still married, and I'm still, and he's appreciated the inappropriateness of that. But this takes us to two sides of the coin here. Number one, if I did not feel confident about myself, that would have destroyed me. I'm not saying I didn't have a really nasty retort, but I won't share that. But if I didn't feel good about that, I'd have been devastated. You know, I just recovered from something, and this was all she could think about. But think about it as the giver, of the owner of that cane. We have to be really aware of how we interact with our peers when we're giving advice, and make sure not to use the cane. There are always better ways of saying things. So that's why the cane is there. Keep that in mind as we go forward. So, every closet tells a story. If I were to go to any one of your closets right now, what percentage of the clothes in that closet are you actually using? I'll take numbers.
5%. 20%.
15? 50. Men are 50? Women? How about women? 90%. You use 90%? You're impressive. You break all the rules. Anybody else?
60%.
Woo! This is strange. You guys are really impressed with me because you're in, numbers. But mostly I hear 20%. That's a really scary number because everybody has their own budget or should have their own budget for when they set up a wardrobe. It's an important tool, as I've indicated. And if you don't respect the fact that it is a tool, you will waste a lot of money, get a lot of frustration, never feel confident when you go out, and usually look pretty out of style. Not that style per se matters. It's all about how it looks on you. But a lot of stories come out of closets, including this one. This is me working with one of my clients, and we'll call her Jay. And Jay was, well, as you can see, she likes clothing. And that's just part of it, trust me, you don't want to even know the piles outside that room. But we thought that kind of showed the whole thing, that you can actually get buried in your possessions if you don't manage them. She not only had too much, but she didn't have it under control, and it wasn't visible. I'm a big believer you've got to see everything to know it. Again, that it's all about seeing. So at the end of the day, we sorted through everything, and that became her shoe wardrobe, what was left of it. And it was all organized from the most casual to the most dressy at the top because it had to follow her lifestyle. And the way it was placed was intentional so she could see the heels and get in and out quickly. So at the end of the day, for her, part of the reason she was having a chaotic life in her closet was because she was having a chaotic life. Ultimately, not just because of me, she did get a divorce. And often I'll find that when people start cleaning, they're going through a transition. Sometimes the transition has happened, and sometimes the transition's about to happen, and they've been hiding under chaos. So I like to talk about something called wardrobe ready. It's a term I use to explain my goal for all of you. And it basically means that if you follow these 5 points, you will constantly have a closet that you are using, where you're using the majority of the things, where they'll be comfortable for you, where they'll be current for you, and you will feel confident when you go out in public and be appropriate. So everybody's budget's different because of different stages in life and different family issues and educational issues and all that good stuff, and any budget is fine as long as you respect it and work within it. I've been known to shop with people from TJ Maxx all the way to Neiman Marcus. I don't care where you shop as long as you get the best quality items for you, and you don't need a lot of things to make that happen. So anyway, the most important thing is to edit your closet. Every once in a while, I say every 6 months. Sit down, take a good hard look. What's worn out? What doesn't fit properly? What hasn't survived the dry cleaner? What are you just sick of? Get rid of it. When I say get rid of it, I don't mean throw it out. I mean recycle, whether it's thread up or giving it to the whatever charity you're involved with, or if it's not something of high value that you would want to use for, say, the Real and get money back out of it. There are lots of good ways that you can recycle the clothing. When you put it back in, arrange it. I gave you a little snapshot of one person's closet. Arrange it so it works for you, so you get the most use out of everything you have. Define your style. That goes into the things I was referring to a little bit earlier, like tools that we use. I said in the very beginning, if you think about that picture I showed of myself, I said I hope it looked organic. Well, the reason it should, if you're following the rules that I use, is everything in that, from my logo to the colors I wore for the photo shoot, to the makeup, to the accessories, they all followed what I call my color fan. So this is the science of it. Color's a huge part of one's look, and these are my colors. And as you can see today, I'm wearing these colors. Every single thing I have on matches these colors. So even though I have a different outfit on, even though I said I got ready for this event by dressing very intentionally, it was all with this in mind too. So when you have to define yourself, you define your lifestyle, you have to look at your body, be honest with it, and hence the best parts of it. Keep your hair groomed. Keep your hair groomed. Keep your nails groomed. What is the first thing people do? You shake hands. You sign a document, right? Oh, you want me to sign where? Right? Even if you've been working in, on your bike, or working, if you've been in the water all weekend and their hands are rough, think about your hands that make a big statement. That's the first point of contact, right? So the last thing I'm going to talk about here is the buying. I kind of cheated. I was trying to spell ready, but I couldn't find the right word for it. So it'd be buy. Buy carefully. Don't believe in sales. Sales are only good if you need something. There's no good reason to go to a sale if you actually don't need to replace something in your wardrobe. You will never wear the item. I can almost guarantee it. The clothing you don't wear, I bet, are all separates and probably have their tags on them. Don't buy separates, buy outfits. So that's my little bit of economic advice for you all. I'm going to show you some real fast examples here that how to, depending on who you are and what your field is, these are some looks for women to show you how to get pulled together and look very polished without having to necessarily wear a formal suit. A lot of women aren't wearing suits as much in the financial world these days. And I constantly hear it and constantly have to come up with ways to make them look polished without looking like a man. Men, I've heard a lot about office casual, and there's a lot of times where you don't have to put a tie on. I get that. But you can put together a wardrobe that's all coordinated like this, so you don't have to take a lot of time in the morning, and you can mix and match pieces so you can get as dressed up or dressed down as you need for dates or for a night out with the guys or meeting a client. What I wanted to just say in conclusion is that everyone has the opportunity to make the best first impression. Take advantage of that opportunity. It is a step up for you. Understand how to shop, learn how to shop for quality. Anything, by the way, that I'm saying here, you're welcome to email me questions, go on my website, which should be the last slide that's not showing, so I'll find it and give it to you later. But I have cards for everybody. I'm more than happy to help you address. Everything's very personal. As we mentioned, there's a concept to this, but everything I'm saying is only about each person individually. Because individually, you have to approach yourself that way. You are who you are, and you are your best star. So with that, I want to just say, make your best impression, take advantage of it, get to know yourself and appreciate yourself, stop fighting yourself, and make sure your people you're meeting are listening to the words you're saying and not focusing on your look. So with that, I'd like to go to my panel. Are there any questions at this point that you would like to hear? No? Okay, cool. So, you'll notice in the beginning I did say, the first time someone shows you who they are, believe them. Now that couldn't be more accurate than if you were going, as I said, to look in the mirror. You better believe yourself. So how does it feel when you look in that mirror in the morning? What do you actually see? Do you believe what you see? Are you surprised? Do you know what to do with it to make it look the best you can? We want to make sure, as we go along, that there are no discrepancies between how we feel about ourselves and how we show ourselves. And one of the most interesting places you'll find that come up is when you meet with someone like Marianne talking about a job, or when you go to see Christina and she's hiring, or Lauren and they're hiring. The first thing they're going to do is see you. So to that I say, did a recruiter, and this is for you all to think about, did a recruiter, employer, or colleague ever tell you or suggest, hopefully not with that cane, that you needed to alter or improve your appearance in order to do the job effectively? You don't have to answer me. You don't want to. Just think about that. These are thoughts I want in your mind as we're going. Justin, you have a high visibility career. I think you're working with John Copeland?
I was until recently.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, cool. I thought that was, okay. So you have a very high visibility career with high net worth individuals. You're interfacing a lot of pressure, a lot of money on the line. Do you find your image has to change, or do you feel like it is changing as you move from different settings? Or do you feel there's a consistency to you, so they know who they're getting?
Can I ask first, are you responsible for John Copeland's fantastic image? Because he is one of the sharpest dressed guys in the behavior matches. And so,
No,
okay.
I love him, but no. We're friends.
So I would say that there's, I think of kind of who I am, the person I presented, as there's one version of me, but kind of along a continuum. So, I don't think I want to be an entirely different person ever, but, depending on the situation I'm in, I might behave slightly differently or prepare my image slightly differently. So, if I'm in a group with, really senior guys at my firm or another firm, I might determine this is the right time to be a little bit deferential, and, I'll voice up if it's something, I have a lot of insight on, but generally, I'm not going to be as front and center than if I'm, around a bunch of kind of more junior colleagues who are looking to me for direction. So I think identifying in that situation kind of how you might want to shade your image is important. Since you mentioned the UK in here, one example of that, so it's part of it's who you are, but I think it's also thinking about, relative to a group, what might be interesting about you or unique about you, and what might those people be interested in talking to you about. So I spent a year working in a branch in England, and I love soccer. I grew up interested in soccer, and I thought, this is going to be great. I can talk to people about soccer. Nobody wanted to talk to me about soccer because they can talk to Chuck or Eddie or someone who's probably a lot more informed about that than me. That's not a unique thing to them. So something they did want to talk about, two things in particular, very interested in US politics and more informed than me in US politics, which they found somewhat disappointing. And then the other is they have a disturbing obsession with US high school culture, and if it's really like Saved by the Bell and all the movies. Multiple people just needed to know if it's really like that in America.
You asked about the guns, basically.
Yeah, so I guess part of it too then, in a roundabout way of answering this, and I hope no one wrote down no Saved by the Bell next time I go to the UK, but it's kind of figuring out what might make you unique and interesting to the people you're around. So, another example is if you're younger and you're millennial and a lot of your colleagues are older, they may think if someone brings up a new technology that you should know what Bitcoin is, you should know what blockchain is, you should know what Wealthfront or Betterment or one of those things is. If they want to know about an old school, pick up the phone and call a broker, they know that stuff, but they're always thinking, what unique experience does this person bring? What unique insights might this person bring? And try and think about that if you're expecting to meet up with a group, and what might they be interested in picking your brain about.
Pretty much so they can focus on the words and not worry about the part we were talking about, right?
Yep.
Get to the meat of the matter. I think what Justin said also is that same thing I was talking about with that star thing. You are the star, but you've got to know how to be brighter or lighter depending on the environment. So modulate. Okay. Did you have any questions for that answer? Anybody? Yes.
Justin, I just want to ask you, when you do travel overseas or when you do spend time overseas, do you have to adjust your wardrobe given the tastes, say in England versus what's maybe in style here in the U.S.? Have you run into that at all?
I mean, in an ideal world, I would. I've got a couple go-to suits. Maybe, I do think part of it is probably working with what you have. You might want more of a tighter, European cut suit, not a Tony Soprano suit if you're going over there. But I think if it was something that, and I'm probably guilty of underinvesting a little bit in my wardrobe and the strategic component of my wardrobe, but
We can help you there.
it's probably a good idea.
I think that's a fair point. And mentioning Tony Soprano, I had a client once who's a gentleman who ran a prestigious real estate firm, and he called me in, and he's always dapper. He wears a jacket, a tie, and he's done every day, unlike a lot of realtors in this world. And that's the style he wants for his entire firm. So I went to his house and looked in his closet, and I literally had to throw, in this case, I'm almost going to say throw out, 50 suits that were of the Tony Soprano big shoulder thing, like big. And they were all various sizes. They were literally dusty. He had never, I don't know the last time he wore them. I had to recycle 100 shirts. I think I really, in some way or another, disposed of $50,000 of clothing that was sitting there. He did not have a big closet. So, it was like, whoa. We reinvested about 20, and he's using everything and looks fabulous. It's the right size. So it goes to a point, be ready in your for meetings and whatever your life is. So that's that wardrobe ready thing. If you're being called to London, if you're being called to go to a basketball game, if you're being called to go to a black tie, you should be ready for anything that you would expect to happen within your life that matches your lifestyle and your interests. So, good question. Christina, you entered the workforce at 19 after graduating from Wharton. I don't know how you did that, but it sounds amazing. And you devote a great deal of energy to mentoring women in particular. I know the ratio of women to men in this industry is, I guess it's 85 to 15. Fortunately, tonight we are the larger number of the panel, bigger percentage. So, and I thank you all for being here. It's actually better diversified in the audience than I would have thought of based on that. So this is a good sign. So were there any specific mentors that you met along the way or influencers that made you into the wonderful and accomplished and generous woman that you are?
Actually, it's funny, and then it's almost the opposite. So I went to Wall Street directly, and it was so educational to see how the women were treated there, which was not well. That's when I left Wall Street and moved down to Florida. I opened my own firm because women will find that it's much easier to open your own firm in many instances than it is to work for a male firm. So women in finance still make less than the men. It's just a fact. There's CFA Institute will give you all those statistics. And the women on the Wall Street back in the 80s were really more the trading assistants and the people that did support for the people that were making more money. So when I moved, I had my CPA, and I worked for one of the big 8 firms there, which is now a big 4. And what I ended up doing was specializing in broker-dealers, and I learned I worked for specialty audits on the broker-dealer side, and I learned a lot about finance. And then when I moved down to Palm Beach back in '97, I moved to the island because my mother-in-law lived in Palm Beach. We had the only grandchild, and she bribed us to move to Palm Beach.
Well.
So I started my own firm, small, very small, which is a really good way for women to do it. I learned from people all around me. Most of the time they were men, but having your own firm lets you hire your own people and work at the pace you can and get your own network and get your own clients and feel good about what you're doing. So it was because I saw how it was on Wall Street, which was not good for women, that I decided not to pursue that corporate. Now it's much, much better at this time, and there's much more with diversity. But back in the 80s, it was a very hard time for women to get the pay that they should have gotten. So that's why I started my own firm.
So for those of you who weren't around in the 80s on Wall Street, I once went for a job interview at a place that's no longer Lehman Brothers, so I am aging myself, but it's okay. And I remember, considering my background, I remember going in and women were wearing these bow ties. Like these, yes, right?
Yes.
Talk about uncomfortable, right? So I remember, this is not to sound totally like a fool, but I said, there's no way I'm coming to work in an industry where I have to dress like that and be that buttoned up and look like a man in order to be accepted. Because at that point, men didn't know what to do with women there, and women had to just blend in. Am I right? You had to just blend in. You could not be a woman. You just had to blend in and be like a woman man. You couldn't. My 2 cents. Any other questions about Christina? Anybody else in the panel have a mentor that was really helpful in their following the path?
So I can give 2 specific examples. A friend of mine from the University of Miami, she did Latin American wealth management. And it's a little bit of a cultural difference between Latin America and the United States, is what she told me. But her experience was that some clients would just say, "Oh, I don't want to talk to a woman, and can you get me someone else?" Things like that. Those are some of the barriers she had to deal with. Luckily, she went to for her case, she went to New York and works domestically and does very well. That's one example. The second example is that my current boss actually is a woman, and in the utilities sector, they're very far and few between. In terms of senior analysts in our sector, she might be the only one in the U.S. There's some associate analysts that are women, but I mean, she encounters so many barriers, not only to get to where she was, because she does very, very well for herself, but even to where she is now, it's a daily struggle, whereas some management teams are still living in the past and are chauvinist and whatnot. So I really applaud her and admired by everything that she's done and can accomplish anyway. It's very inspiring.
So that's a real story. These are real stories, and I know that they happen. I would say that that's a good point to reinforce how wonderful the society is for women and men in the workforce, because here's a place where you not only can get education, but you can find people who perhaps could mentor you or help you in a work situation where you may not be able to go to a colleague and ask about how to handle a certain situation. You're surrounded by people who are not necessarily your competitors. These are people in the industry, and how else do we all learn but relying on others? So it's a good time for a shout out there, if I can do that. Okay. Laura, it's your turn. So you recently moved from Paris and London, if I'm not mistaken, to Fort Lauderdale. So you not only changed countries, you changed languages because you were speaking French, and you are now changing your job responsibilities as well. So would you like to describe a little bit, or a lot, what your biggest challenges were?
I think the hardest challenge was finding the right fit initially, and that goes back to finding the firm and finding what works for you. I came from a small firm in Paris. We were 5 people in our offices in London and Paris, and the focus was on meritocracy, about working hard, getting the job done, and that's something that I really value. So when I was changing firms, it was really something that I was looking for was, the people that I'm going to work with, do they value that? Are we on the same page in terms of, if I'm putting in the work, am I going to be recognized for that? Will I also enjoy working with the people that I work with? Is it a respectful environment? Are people driven? Those are the types of things that I think are very important to look for when you're, finding that firm that you could potentially stay at for the majority of your career. Other challenges were more cultural in nature, I think. So when I did move here, France and the United States are quite different in culturally. And one of the hardest parts about it were learning the HR norms in the United States. And I don't think, being from here, you might not realize how different culturally they might be. And one of the things that I did was to reach out to people in the industry that I knew, reach out to different people who were in management roles, and try to learn, what are the key things that you need to do to, to be a good manager and respect those HR norms that you have in the United States. And I thought that was very important, and it's very difficult, especially when you're going through the interview process, to make sure that you're giving fair and equal opportunities to everyone. And I think that's very important, and that's how you find really great talent. So those are some of the challenges that I faced, changing roles.
Quick question. Would you just elaborate a little bit about, the cultural norms when you're talking about, like, in Europe and this thing? Because specific examples about, how they would, HR would look at the Paris office versus the Fort Lauderdale office.
Well, I've been very lucky in the firms that I've worked with. They have been, great environments, really focused on performance. At both firms that I've been at, the level of growth has been quite strong, and I haven't had very much time to think about anything besides the job at hand. I would say it's the way that you interact with people, the way that you speak to people. It's much more conscious in the United States. I think the way that you will interact on a regular basis, and in France is very formal. The meeting environment is very formal, and so I think that those are some of the cultural differences.
More formal, this is more.
Yeah, it's more, one of the questions is that you had posed earlier was related to the wardrobe, and one of the changes that I needed to make was, going into the office business casual. It's not something that I was familiar with. So, and I have another colleague who's the same way, and he shows up to in the suit every single day, and we kind of stick out in the firm because the environment is much more casual. Which is, it's great. And I think also part of that is due to the heat, because you really couldn't go out in a suit every single day.
Thank you. That leads perfectly to Marianne. I didn't mean to jump over your questions, so I apologize, but this is a perfect seg. So you mentioned the issue of millennials and working into new cultures, not only coming from different countries, but as age changes and your responsibilities change in your job and your career, when you get the charter versus before, what happens? So Marianne, since you are so busy all the time in this world of finance, finding wonderful candidates and helping them grow, it's a two-part question. Do you find the millennial issue to be a big problem, or is it not a problem, but just a stumbling block? Or what would you like to, I don't want to phrase it that way, because perhaps it's just an opportunity to grow.
I would not say it's a problem, but there is an issue. And I'm a millennial, with all due respect to all of you. We're great at hard skills, not so much with soft skills. So when I have a millennial and I'm sending for a job interview, I spend 10 more minutes with them. I don't need to spend that 10 more minutes with a Generation X or a baby boomer. I don't need to tell them about like a firm handshake or an eye contact. I don't need to tell them, read about this company before you go interview. I don't need to mention that, please remember the name of the people that I'm telling you. Read them. When you're handshaking, mention the name. I don't need to tell them, ask for the job when you're leaving the interview, or just have 3 weaknesses. Always know that. When I send you for a job interview, that means on paper you're qualified for this position. This is your chance to go and impress. This is a personality test. They're gonna hire you based on the personality fit. They want to see if it's the right character for that business or not, for that firm. And don't challenge the person who's interviewing you. Don't argue. Don't take your phone on you. It's okay to leave your phone in the car. It's okay, believe me. It's not going to take more than 1 hour, and you're not going to die. I promise. Do they listen? No, the stories I hear. I don't have to tell a Generation X, please suit up. I don't. But for a millennial, definitely, I have to say, please wear a suit. And I'm embarrassed to say that, but I say it. I want you to know, we rate you, even as a recruiter, by the way you dress. When you come in, we have 1, 2, 3. If you're not wearing a jacket, we're going to give you a 2. You're only 1 when you're fully suited, like you're wearing a full suit. Women, men, no difference. And you don't see that on an ad posting, but we have all the information. They say we want a polished financial analyst. That means we want somebody who dresses professionally every day. They don't want business casual. That is not in Florida, unfortunately. It's very different, and people feel like, as Lauren said, because of the heat, it's okay. It's not okay. Do not show up to a job interview with shorts. Don't go after playing golf. It happened. It happened. I promise you. I hear things from after my candidates go to my clients and do that interview, I get the feedback. And they show up to our office professionally. Unfortunately, after the interview, I hear that, oh, they were not dressed professionally. And God, do I get mad. After like having that interview, after that conversation, I'm like, were you listening to me? Like, don't embarrass me. I'm promising my client to send the best candidates, and you showing up there. Don't argue with them, please don't. Your parents love you, you're always going to the person who's interviewing you, they don't think that way. They think they're right, okay? So those are the things, yeah, definitely I feel like millennials need more work in this soft skill area. And I definitely spend more time. I send them emails, I talk to them on the phone, and I send them files to review and read. But again.
So you kind of are answering the second part, which was what weight does having all the great degrees carry when you're going for a job interview or to meet with an executive recruiter?
It was about the CFA charter. I
Yes.
would say, my mom once told me, you can never have enough certificates and degrees. You can lose your money, but your certificates and degrees are yours forever. You earned them and they're yours. No one can ever take it away from you. So I definitely say go get that degree, get that certificate. And yes, the employers say, they say CFA or MBA. That means they're comparing that to a higher education level. So you need to have either of them because it's a competitive market and it depends on who you're competing against. But if there are two resumes, all things equal, somebody has CFA, the other one doesn't, the CFA one will get the job. And it definitely helps two groups of people more than anybody, the ones who are fresh college graduates who are entering the workforce. It definitely helps them to get the job. And those who want to get promoted. And for the ones who want to just repeat the same thing over and over again, no, don't spend the money, don't waste it. Don't get a CFA, you don't need that. But for those who want to advance in their career, definitely it helps. It does.
So I think it's interesting because you mentioned something in Lauren, and you're referencing the what I call the soft culture within a specific industry. As I travel through and I work with all different kinds of people, I have to be aware of what the norms are in different industries so I can advise clients what's okay and what's not. And it's often that aspect that, as you mentioned, people aren't thinking about. They think of their degrees, they're thinking about, their salaries, they're thinking about the demands on time and balancing all that. But that soft part of the culture is critical to understand when you work in a place because you will find friction if you can't enjoy the same sensibilities of a company, their sense of what fun is, or their sense of, for example, if the guys or the girls or the whole team, let's call it a team, goes out on Friday nights for a beer and pool. That's one place where the culture will show itself. You're in a situation where you might be with mixed colleagues in terms of their stature. You might be in a situation where you're being tested to see if you can handle your liquor, because it happens when you go out with clients. They serve wine, you go to an event, and if you get snookered, it's not going to look real good. So there are a lot of cultural tests that happen in the name of fun that one has to be aware of, how you're interacting in that setting, and it's not the same as what you might do with your frat or sorority friends. It's a very different thing. So you have to be aware of the soft culture issues that affect, and it gets back to people. I mean, it may look like fun, but they're always watching. They're always watching. Okay, so we're moving along pretty well here. Okay, here's a good one. So we mentioned that 85-15 issue in terms of percentages in this industry, and it's been widely reported, I'm sure we've all heard the stories about when men go into a job interview and they're presented with challenges or leaps perhaps in terms of what they were originally doing and what they're being offered. Men will typically go, oh yeah, I can do that. Of course I can, even if they haven't had the experience. Where women often will go, the doubt, I haven't done it before, will I be good enough? I'm not sure if I'm going to be as good as the guy, I don't know if they'll listen to me, all this negative noise. Okay, that's part of that cultural stuff I was talking about, which forms that star who's you, when I had that slide up before. Women have to fight that. It's a media issue, it's our self-esteem issue, and self-esteem, that big word, is really important in everything you all are doing. So, with that said, I'm going to go from left to right. Can you talk about a time where you were in this situation where you might have been offered a job and it was a leap for you, and how did you respond? Did you take it? Did you take the bait and go, or did you shy away? Did your qualifications, would they hold up against the man who might be up for the job, but yet the man might have gotten? And what happened? Have you had any kind of experiences like that, where that whole issue has shown its thorny side? Anybody can answer.
Well, I'll say, this is just one example, but it's something my wife deals with when she's going for a job for more money or trying to get a promotion, trying to advance her career. At least with her, the way she looks at it is it can be intimidating, and if she doesn't receive positive reinforcement and encouragement, sometimes she can shut down, and she needs that kind of support. But for me, again, maybe it's just the environment that I've grown up with. I'm kind of a sink or swim mentality in the sense that if something seems challenging to me, I feel like I have to work harder. But in terms of moving forward in my career, I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier this evening. It's not just a plug for the CFA Society, it's actually true where when I earned my designation, the senior analyst didn't really have time to go through all the resumes because she was busy covering the stocks, but the person that reported to her was in charge of speaking with the HR department and kind of working with the HR department to find candidates for the interviews. And the associate analyst who was going through the process didn't have the time to read every single resume. The HR department sent 30, 40 resumes a week, and they had gone 6 to 9 months without finding a single resume that they were happy with. But after 6 to 9 months of that, there was another batch 1 week of 30 to 40 resumes, and the associate thumbed through it, and he had the CFA designation, so he knew the work that it took in order to earn the designation. And it's kind of a baseline of effort, if nothing else. And he saw the designation, pulled it out of the pile, and that's how I got the interview. So I think it's really important to earn the CFA designation. It's a great bang for your buck because if you work really hard for a year and a half, you can get the designation, and it costs a lot less than an MBA program. It depends, of course, on your career path. If you want to be a CEO, you're going to need an MBA. But for my role as an associate analyst, the CFA designation is more important because it's more focused in terms of individual security, research and analysis and whatnot, especially level 2. The level 3 exam is more on the wealth management side, portfolio management, which can be a progression in your career going on from the sell side. So I think the CFA designation is very, very important, and I would definitely encourage people to pursue that path.
Perfect.
So in New York, when one of my jobs, I was territory controller for MetLife for real estate investments, and I was 26, and we had over $1 billion worth of real estate, including the Pan Am building, which had a beautiful office looking down Park Avenue. So my team leader, my boss then, was a man named Tony Orbe, and he had been with the military, and he was a big team leader, and that really was an important aspect with me for when you get challenged and whether you step up and say you can do it. He always said, don't ever bring me problems, bring me solutions. So it's the same thing as a challenge. He would ask you to do something, and he would never, if I was gonna say, I can't do that, he would never, he trained me. At first time I gave him that response, he was like, don't give me problems, give me solutions. So I learned right away that you always step up, you always try to provide the solution for a couple choices for your team to choose from, what might work, and let the team come up with it. I truly think that if you go into it with that attitude with the people that you work with and for, and that you're trying to bring up, it's quite helpful. I also think that there's a couple of books, like Turn the Ship Around, which was a Navy captain trying to do that team leadership with the same kind of get the whole group working for positive performance and bringing everybody in that are really helpful, that are not on the CFA curriculum, but they're still they teach us to learn to love education, and there are some great leadership books that will help you. But Sheryl Sandberg, Lena, and all that stuff, you need to be taught that you need to bring your best foot forward to the table and not be shy about striving for success for your team.
Yeah, so maybe one quick personal observation on it too is I have had jobs where, or job offers where I've thought day one, I can't go in and do this job and be effective. So I am comfortable faking it till I make it. And faking it is what we're focused on here, but I do think it's equally important to be able to have a plan to make it. And if you don't think you can make it, then you shouldn't fake it. So
Exactly. I concur.
and I think that should go for men or women, right? So a big part of a job, you know, it's a reality. There's a little bit of a performance art component to it. Look the part, learn your lines, be it, you know, the buzzwords of the industry or the company, and, you know, start out doing just that and do that well. And, you know, maybe then a few months down the line, you have some ideas. I'm going to continue this metaphor, you know, for some script edits, or hey, how about this dialogue, or hey, this is an interesting idea. But again, there's a time and a place for that. And I think you can, you know, at the same time, you can do too much of that in the interview or early on. You don't want to come in and say, hey, I observed, you just explained to me in 30 minutes how you guys do this, and here's a better way, without really understanding it. So along that continuum, you know, I think men and women should both feel confident faking it, as long as they have a plan and they go home and they figure it out. And I would hope, you know, keeping that long-term perspective, like I have no idea what I just heard or learned today and I don't know how to do it tomorrow, is fine as long as you're committed to finding a way to do it effectively down the line.
And I think on that note, in regards to the CFA Institute and the CFA exams, as you mentioned before, making it one of the tools that you have is this being a CFA charter holder. And as a woman in finance, you know, that's one of the things that you might face throughout your career, going up against, it's a male-dominated society, and having a CFA puts you in a place where you have that benchmark. And I feel like, yeah, you have that benchmark, and everyone who's taken the CFA knows how difficult it is, knows how much time goes into writing the CFA. Not everyone, male and female, has made it through the CFA. And so I think that in finance in particular, it's a way to gain a certain level of respect. Like you said, not necessarily because you're smarter, but because you have put in the work. And I think that for both male and female, it's a really important benchmark that employers look at, that, you know, you also have acquired a lot of knowledge that will help you make it to a certain extent applied correctly. So.
Can I add something?
Absolutely.
As she said, yeah, when you have a CFA certificate and you have it in your resume, it's to the employers, it shows your drive. It shows the amount of effort you're willing to put. It's not just the certificate that how much you learn. It's more of this person is willing to do anything to get where he wants or she wants to get. That's one thing that I wanted to add. Yeah, it definitely does give you that credibility. Okay.
Anybody have any question on that issue?
Just a quick question. Basically, we're talking about style and you know, persona and basically dressing in a very physical sense. Right, today basically the market is very different. You're basically, before Mariam calls you or even chooses you, she goes on LinkedIn and she knows more about you than your mom most likely knows. So your social media presence and basically your presentation, your existence is no longer just your physical self anymore, right? So it's and millennials know this so much better than I would ever know, right? So they've basically grown with that whole persona. But one of the things is basically that the whole because I think it's a career panel, I think we're missing out on that part, is like how to use social media and that physical presence into the social world. And one of the things that I'd like to add to this is, yes, CFA is important. Yes, your dressing up is important. It's easier for men, just basically get a white shirt and dark suit and pretty much you can go get by. Europe also.
Same thing.
Time out. I'll time out there.
Slightly more different.
Time out there. There's the issue of fit and quality.
But on the social side, I would say it makes all the difference. Like 10 years ago, it was very easy. Basically, my resume spoke for everything. Basically, they talked to two people. Now it's all there. Right? So now what you're doing, your life exists online. So, and it's a great advantage because now just because you have 20 years or you have worked for Morgan Stanley or big this thing, the new stars are coming out of basically social media. It's not just the entertainment. New financial stars. Basically, if you want to be investment managers, right? So go out, read Graham and Dodd. Go out, basically write a blog about it. Right? Start saying what your stock picks is. And Christopher is actually going to call you and say, hey, I like you, come and talk to me. Just anyway, basically follow him up on Twitter. But because substance matters, right? At the end of the day, that's what I would recommend. I've been in the shoes. I ran, I was on the fund side. I basically, on the PE side, I just sold a company for myself. So, but what I'm trying to say is basically it's a different world. So physical presence is very, very important, no doubt about that, right? But selling yourself is no longer about just physical presence. It's basically like, it's the whole social media. It's your existence is online. And there's so many stuff that's going on. One of the books I would recommend, highly recommend, is a guy by Gary Vee, and he talks about branding, and I think it's right up the alley. Where he talks about like basically your personal brand, right? And where Murray basically is, at that time you don't have to sell yourself, it's out there, right? So, and that's what I bring to the table. It's like your scope is not just basically, your wardrobe and all that stuff. That's very, very important, but it's much, much wider. Exactly. And the advantage is great leveler also, right? So if you're not going to grade school, but you know the knowledge, she doesn't care whether you basically went to this thing, as long as you, as a trader, basically I don't care. Some of the best traders I never came from the Ivy schools. I can guarantee you that. They get the associate program. I'll give you an example. Name of the guy is, he used to trade gas for Enron back in the day. Okay.
That's another conversation.
I'll give you an example. He's worth $3.5 billion right now. So he's, because he used to be gas trader, 23 years old, right? He used to run the gas desk, and when Enron went under, they started his own fund. But he went to from a Texas Christian University, not an Ivy League school, not a good school in Texas also, I went to school at Rice. And basically, but this guy, he had a standard. And the issue is basically, in today's world, at that time, people had to know him because of the industry. But now, basically, the stars are coming up, investment stars are coming out of online. So I think that branding is that part is very important also. So.
I wouldn't disagree. And to that, go ahead, Christopher.
I just wanted to throw in addition to just knowing, if nothing else, that you have the work ethic from the CFA designation. Obviously, my former firm, Wells Fargo, has been over the news, so maybe it's specific to that firm, but I worked on a floor where I provided research to one specific financial advisor, and I got to interact with a lot of other financial advisors on the floor. And with the ones that didn't have the CFA designation, a lot of them, unfortunately, in my opinion, were not ethical. There were times where there was something called a growth reward, where you got if you could grow your commissions 15% from the prior year, you got a huge bonus. So come December, at the end of the year, everyone's trying to get clients into IPOs, even if they're not necessarily great deals. However, there were about 3 or 4 financial advisors with the CFA designation. And even when I would just go out and have a drink with one of them one-on-one, just be completely honest with them, every single one of them were ethical. Every single one of them were all about the clients and the client's best interest, saying, oh, I think longer term, if I do what's right for the clients are, my business is going to grow over time. They tend to think more longer term. And I think that's definitely recognized with other people who have the designation. I'm curious if other people have a similar experience. Maybe it's not as well known for the clients, but for other people who have the designation, I think most would agree that those who have the designation are definitely ethical in the way that they pursue their business.
So if I can take that, since we're on that point of ethics, when you're hiring, if you have a candidate that's coming up who's been at a firm that's gone south, or who had a reputation for unethical dealings, how does that affect that candidate? I mean, like the culture that they came out of. Am I making that clear? So if someone came out of, I'm going to say Bear Stearns, or if they came out of Enron, or if they, something that's sunk largely.
Jobs, trust me.
So they were, because of the reason you were mentioning, or I mean, I guess what I'm asking is there a mark against them because they were in a culture that might have not have been the most ethical of settings?
What I will say on the wealth management side, with Wells Fargo at least, I think that if you came from a firm that went belly up, that alone isn't necessarily a knock against you. However, there are resources where you can look up a broker's history, and if they have a knock on them for ethical reasons. I mean, if I were a client, I would say absolutely don't even think about it. It doesn't matter if it was 5 or 10 years ago. I would never do business with someone like that.
I'm seeing some head noddings on this side. Good.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, as with a lot of things, it's situation specific, and think about a firm that blew up. So like long-term capital management was some of the smartest guys in the world. And the trades they performed were actually brilliant and smart, and firms still do them today. They just had bad risk management. So a bad risk manager or a bad policy on the size of positions is what blew it up. Or some of the, I think, firms in the GFC, it was the same thing. It was a leverage issue, and a rank and file person doing trades that are profitable trades, that might not be the issue. And Enron or somewhere else, you have a few accounting people making a policy judgment. So you kind of have to understand the situation. If you were, worked at a, boiler room on Long Island that got, kind of turned over, and the entirety of what you were doing was not above board, I think that's kind of a different scenario. So I don't think you should rule people. Sorry?
I think we know the name of that guy.
Yeah, so I don't think you should rule anybody out based on that. I think maybe you do a little extra digging on, what exactly did you think you were doing, or what, of what has happened after the fact, what might you have had a reasonable understanding of, and that could be a red flag.
So that's like a suiting up, in essence, knowing what you're coming from. I mean, I would imagine when they do interviews, if you have to be super careful.
Just so you know, so the CFA Institute has the Asset Managers Code, where the code, the firm can adopt the code, and our firm belongs, but there are, we're probably one of the very smallest firms that belongs, but there are, yeah. So you know that the whole, the firm has adopted putting the client first. And there's also the CFA ethics. Most people, when you're hired by a firm, they have an ethical, they're going to have tons of paperwork that you fill out, but those are certainly the ethics and the trading, that's all going to be done through the corporate to be monitored in all of the companies that you're going to work for.
Yeah, so that's a good point. And I think a nuance people don't always appreciate about the CFA is you sign up to the code of conduct, regardless of what your firm wants you to do. You can't go to you can't carry out a lower code of conduct just because your firm says it's okay. So to Miriam's point, there are situations where your charter can be taken away from you, right? So if you do violate the code of the ethics, and you shouldn't have. So I think that mechanism, the hope is that dealing with someone who's signed up for and bought into it will bring them to a higher degree of ethical competency than what is required by their firm alone. So it's kind of an extra safeguard policy.
I was going to say, it sounds like a good insurance policy for all of you to have. Either one.
Yeah, I have a comment in terms of the role that body language have in shaping your image, and probably you might have more context on when people are modeling and they have to come with a certain posture and some kind of finesse to project something to the potential, I don't know, customer or whatever. So I was wondering, as we build that image, how important is to be aware and to receive feedback on your body language?
I think, personally, I think it's critical. Of course, as I said, I did start as a dancer, so I'm like super conscious of body and posture, and I hope you'll notice I was standing fairly straight the whole time, and even though I'm standing in front, I'm not. Right? I mean, so it matters, it clearly matters. So I think that you've been having to look at me, well, you didn't have to, but, I'm sort of been the focused, and everyone in the panel has been seated very nicely. No one's sitting with their leg crossed, leaning back in the chair. There are things that are clearly body language. I think there's a caution, and certainly there are books I can, recommend, but I think that there is a caution one has to have about being too studied, because you can read through that too. You kind of have to chisel away at being too studied so people can actually see the real you. If you come with the right qualifications, if you come with the CFA, if you've had a good record, and tell me if I'm wrong, you have to have a good, confident and attentive body language, and certainly a courteous one. But if you start taking very, they're going to see your body language and they're not going to see you. So I think that there's a certain amount of caution you need when you're following those books, and I'm not against books, but I think that sometimes it's very regimented, and you have to understand, if you have a bad back, it's going to be hard to take some of those, postures probably. So just be cautious and conscious of being natural. Do you find that people who are hiring on the committee?
I think, one of the things that you mentioned on at the beginning was the handshake. And
Absolutely.
when you're going into an interview, I think confidence is key. Introducing yourself is also key. The way that you present yourself is going to be how you're presenting your firm. And especially when you're client facing, that's very important, not only in what you say, but how you present yourself on behalf of your company. And so I think that those are things that you need to take into consideration. And a lot of that is the body language that you portray, and the way that you greet people and the way that you meet people. So I would definitely agree that, you know, that is part of the first impression, is when you're when you're meeting someone for the first time, is going to be that handshake, you know, hi, how are you? I think in our firm, one of the things that we really value is being humble, being kind, being someone that you want to work with, and those are things that can be portrayed by how you act and what your body language looks like as well.
So Amy Cuddy does these great videos on YouTube, and it's power poses, and they've shown on the YouTube how when you do the power poses, it lowers your cortisol level, and you interview better when you're less stressed. So if you're worried about interviewing or making a bad impression, all the things you can do to decrease your cortisol level will make you actually be more at ease, friendlier. You'll be more attentive to remembering the people's names and having snappy comebacks. It's all part of actually being more self-assured, and
Exactly.
it cycles. And so Amy Cuddy, you can look her up on YouTube, but they actually had her reduce the stress level before the exams for charter holders.
Oh, there you go.
And they tell you can have it for your kids and their exams, SATs and stuff like that. But I actually had it for my level CFA 3 review. The guy was showing the Amy Cuddy tape and telling us all we had to do it before the exam. It was pretty funny.
Does Robert Half offer any kind of information sessions like that for your candidates?
We do have videos that we share. We don't feel very comfortable addressing those issues, but not before we send a candidate to a client for an interview. But when I'm prepping them before the interview, I definitely, if I felt like they were too comfortable sitting in front of me when I was interviewing them, I would be mentioning something about that. Or if I felt like they feel, I don't know, there are things like I interviewed a guy. He was very he was in his 20s, and he was a CFO.
Wow.
And very impressive. And he moved down here from New York. He was so nervous that he kept touching his shirt and his hair, and I wanted to say, listen, here is the last place you want to be nervous, because I'm on your team. You don't need to be nervous, first of all. Second, we all get nervous. I'm dying of nervousness now. Honestly, I hate public speaking, but we don't have to show it by shaking legs or doing. You need to practice. You definitely need to practice. Look yourself in the mirror.
There we go, that mirror.
Try to recreate it. Yeah, try to recreate that situation. Try to think about it and feel that anxiety, and then try to train yourself how you're gonna act when you're that anxious. And try to think about the worst case scenario. You're going to lose that job. Fine. It's okay. I mean, there is another opportunity. So we don't usually address it before we send anybody to a client, but when we're going to send them for an interview, I definitely take a note after the interview that they were so nervous. So I will definitely talk to them about that. Yeah. It affects
So much.
Yeah.
Simple breathing. That was going back to that whole issue of virtuosity versus sincerity. You know, you can be the best possible analyst or whatever, but if you look shady because your body language is weird, they're not going to trust you. It's very simple, you know, and so. Yes.
I'd like to add a little bit more color specific to interviews because I actually took primary responsibility for hiring our team's second associate, and therefore I engaged with our HR department and received feedback from the HR department, so I have some feel for at least what my firm's HR department looks at. They look at the body language. Posture is very important. If you're leaning back, if you're slouching, They like to see candidates that are leaning forward, that are making eye contact, that are engaged in the conversation, listening to every word carefully, not having written down responses to everything, catering your responses to the questions that are asked. Another thing I'd like to add is that my father-in-law actually is a pretty high executive with NextEra Energy, and he makes a lot of hiring decisions. And this is a little bit more extreme than what you'll encounter in a lot of cases, but he's in his late 60s, and it might be his generation where he says, I won't hire anyone if I don't get a handwritten thank you note. And he encourages me to do it every time in the past where I would apply for a job. If you're dealing with someone who's in their 20s or early 30s, which is less common for higher positions at least, there's a small chance they might think, oh, just send me an email, a handwritten note's annoying. But I would say that my parents' generation at least, the vast majority of them will be very impressed if you do a handwritten note. His advice was if you don't trust the post office to get it there within at least a week at the latest, physically go there and take it to the front
Wow.
desk and say, I have a thank you note for every single person I met. Please make sure they get it. Because you don't want to disrupt them during their workday necessarily, but you want to make sure it gets there. No questions about it. So those are a couple of tips that certainly helps me.
Does anyone on the panel remember the book, What Color is Your Parachute? So,
it's because I'm the oldest one on
well, I know it, so there you go. So, but there's an example, right, where it was fascinating, but everybody in our generation read that as the Bible when they were going out to get jobs. And that's another cultural thing. You have to be aware of who you're dealing with. You still have to be yourself, but do it so if you're dealing with the older generation, live by their mores. I mean, it's still being elegant. It's still being.
I just bought framed note cards and put them on the things that we need to write more thank you notes for all of our clients and mail us presents or do something special. Please don't send them an email. And I put them at we have a young millennial, and I said, this is a note card.
That's so funny. I don't know if anyone here's noted. Oh, you had a question before. I'm so sorry. Did you get it answered?
Yeah, we're way off topic. But
That's all right. As I said, it's going to be informal. We covered the prescribed questions I had, so now this is,
it was
Q&A.
it was just more on a question more regards to on the institutional side. In other words, because we talked about whether or not having a CFA charter holder designation would assist with the job hiring process, and clearly we got answers to yes to that. And I wanted to just ask on the institutional side, how much does that help? And because I have a slightly true story, which unfortunately happened, where I manage a small hedge fund, and we were in a competition for emerging managers, and we actually won this competition. I mean, we thought it was a big hoopla, and flew up to New York City, and sure enough, they said, okay, we're going to give you a $10 million allocation to get you guys started. And we said, great, fantastic. And only after the fact, when it came down to a due diligence on the back end, and this wasn't a due diligence on the actual trading and the performance, because everyone knows that the dynamic build of a portfolio is going to perform X, Y, and Z, and even then performance is going to vary, so you can hold you to that. But GSEC came back, Goldman Sachs Execution Clearing came back and said, who are these guys who are running this thing? And sure enough, they actually, from a risk management, they ex-nayed the allocation. And we lost a $10 million allocation for that reason. And I was curious, in that situation, if, let's say, partners and I...
Were all the people charter holders?
No, none of us are.
Oh.
No, none of us are. And
Yeah.
yes. What do you think drove me to it? No. But basically, and that was one of the questions, is that if, for instance, like myself, I was a CFA charter holder in that situation, maybe my partners had a couple other designations, because, like I said, performance is something that can be somewhat temporary. Does someone on the institutional side come in and they look at these managers and say, well, we like the fact that, and you could, I think it was Justin that was referencing this, but maybe not, that do they like to see the fact with, for instance, with this manager or team of managers, that they have these designations because there's not just been a trial process, but also because they know that there's that level of integrity and level of degree, and that passes some of those risk kind of question marks.
Well, we've done the RFPs and put in that we have the charter holders and the asset firm as the asset manager code of conduct. That's like the highest level of you want gives performance.
Yeah.
I think, like, in the search process, I can definitely speak to what we see on a regular basis, and the questions that institutional firms are asking are, how many MBAs do you have, how many charter holders do you have, CPA designation, different designations, and I think that is definitely taken into consideration. Also, the performance that you portray externally is very important. GIPS compliance is key for any institutional RFP or TGQ that you're working on. I think it gives legitimacy to the firm and how you're calculating your returns and the standard that you're held to presenting those externally. And then, a lot of it does come down to your reputation in the industry and then your track record. And I think that, at our firm in particular, our portfolio manager is not necessarily a CFA, but has 20 years of investment experience. And, people recognize the long track record, and that's very helpful. And in the institutional space, good or bad, I think that track record is really scrutinized to a certain degree. And institutionally, they'll look for a 3-year track record, that mark where they feel like they can analyze, performance over a number of different markets and really see what you're capable of doing. And so there's a variety of factors that play into it in different cultures, the Nordics or Canada, Australia. I think there's more emphasis on the designations than in other places, more emphasis on ESG in particular. And there are many different factors that weigh in on that, but I think that if you have, you're working towards a goal, you have that track record, I think that'll definitely be taken into consideration.
Yeah, I just was going to say, I've never heard of a strict requirement that you have, X number of CFA charter holders on your staff. Usually it's more of kind of an affirmative piece of due diligence as opposed to a restrictive one or an exclusionary one. Unless it was disclosed at some point that, it was up front it was disclosed as something, I'm going to get the AAA hotel rate, but I'm not a AAA member. Okay, you got me. I shouldn't have checked that box. But and I think it's probably the CFA charter is probably seen as it can be supplemental if you have, again, like a somewhat less competitive background, but certainly not a requirement. And I would say if you're a quant equity shop, probably you would be better off getting a PhD in math if you are looking to, or a computer science undergrad degree or anything, right? So, it wasn't the one for you, I guess, and, maybe, figure out that, and a lot of it depends too, for them, whoever's giving out that money has a boss, and it may just feel like a bigger bet for them if they're really, it requires a lot of conviction to choose someone who has, limited track record or a non-traditional background. So, it's unfortunate that they didn't, in that point in time, want to take a career risk, and hopefully, whoever does will be rewarded.
So going back to my experience with Wells Fargo, the way it worked in our wealth management platform was there were individuals who selected the funds that were on the platform, and then the financial advisors could obviously choose the funds within that platform. The feedback I received from the individual who contributed towards decisions of what funds would be on the platform, even at Wells Fargo, he said, I'm not trying to hit a grand slam with the funds that I put on the platform. I'm just trying to not get in trouble, trying not to make a big mistake, trying to make sure that I deal with a fund that's going to have integrity and not totally blow up relative to the benchmark. Just trying to do something that's safe. And while we can't say that, CFA designation gives you better performance, that's something we definitely can't say. I think that what he had expressed to me was that if I see someone who has the CFA designation as the lead portfolio manager, or I see someone with a Harvard MBA or an Ivy League MBA, I think, okay, there's a base level of work ethic, there's a base level of knowledge, and specifically with the CFA designation, there's a base level of ethics. So that's the feedback I've heard from the platform. Not every lead portfolio manager on the platform had the designation, but it makes the person making those decisions feel a little bit safer, because they know there's a baseline of ethics and knowledge and work ethic. As far as the financial advisors choosing the funds on the platform, what I would say is that the financial advisors who don't have the CFA designation plus place less weight on it. However, the financial advisors that did have the CFA designation or do have it, again, they think the same thing as the person who chose the funds for the platform. They think, okay, well, they may not be the best choice, but at least I know there's a base level of ethics, there's a base level of knowledge, and a base level of time they put into it, knowledge and ethics. So I think it's really important, and it definitely gives an edge for sure.
Speaking of Wells Fargo, I'm going to inject a little bit about the form issue. I have a client who is the CFA, believe it or not, who works for Wells Fargo. And when I first met her, she's stunning. I mean, stunning. But she approached me because she knew that she didn't dress accordingly to her stature. And she worked in a small group and makes a lot of presentations to clients, potential clients. And she needed help. I was like, okay. I went in her wardrobe. Everything she had was, going back to your issue of prescribed ways to do things, was strictly straight cut, very manly looking. Okay, she's a lovely looking woman. Manly covered. She just looked like she was trying to be a man to fit in and to hide sort of within the environment that she was in so that they would just look at the CFA. Ultimately, we talked about it, and because of her family background, she felt like she couldn't spend money on clothing. She couldn't show herself. At the end of the day, we cleaned out her closet. We got her much better quality things that go well together. Sure, her businesses, I'm not saying this is always going to happen. Her business has improved because she walks into meetings with confidence. She knows that the people she's meeting with see that she understands quality, that she's not only prepared in terms of what she can bring to the table because of her education, but she can talk their language. And they're little signals, like what leathers do you invest in? You don't need 5 good leather purses or 5 good pairs of leather Oxfords. You have to get the right pair. Start with one. Start with a good, well-tailored suit and get a bunch of different ties and jackets, ties and shirts that make that work for itself. There are things you can do, and literally her business has improved because she has more confidence when she walks in. She may be competing with a bunch of other people, but she knows she's doing her best because she feels like herself. She knows she's showing herself in an appropriate way, and then she gets better business because she's being sincere. She's being prepared, but she's being sincere in her presentation. She's not hiding what she really looks like, which is lovely. And there goes to the next question, the Me Too world. So we're all dealing and hearing about the Me Too thing, and it's a real thing. And since women are such a small factor in terms of numbers in this industry, do you feel constricted in some way? I'm speaking to the women in the room. In terms of how you get to present yourself or how you're going to be regarded? Does it affect how your confidence or your presentation? Conversely, for the men, has that made you change the way you may or may not deal with women in the workplace? I mean, have you decided I've heard some people say it's going to be sort of a riptide in the other direction, a riptide in the sense that where the men are not going to include the women because they're scared they're going to get accused of things just by nature. So I'm kind of throwing out the conversation to stir the waters here. Chime in as you will. We'll start with the panel.
I'd like to say I think it's a difficult topic, and the Me Too movement is about women who have come out speaking out against abuse in the workplace or abuse generally in their lives, and I think that's something that I personally haven't had to deal with, and so I can't necessarily comment on that. But I think that in the workplace you should have a compliance officer, you should have someone that you can turn to in case anything does happen, and that's a very serious matter. And I think that it's coming out is a good thing. And it also goes back to one of the first points that I had mentioned, that was, when you're going through the recruiting process and you're looking at firms, I would encourage everyone to go online, read what people are saying about the firms that you are working at, that you could potentially be working at, and find a firm that's focused on your merit and on your performance and on what you bring to the table as a person, not a man or a woman, but just because you show up and you work hard and your performance will matter. And I think that that's very important when building your career, is associating yourself with firms that value that. So that would be my...
That's a great comment. I think that what you're saying is really the crux of the matter. And I find it's a hot topic, obviously, when I'm working with individuals, but you should all I mean, assuming you're all getting or have the CFA charter, you're going in with an even playing field in that sense, that you know that you're all qualified. You don't have to play the sex game. I'm going to say it. You know, you don't have to play games. You shouldn't play games in the workplace. There's no place for that if you want to succeed and grow. And I think that's a two-sided thing, but I think that we all have a responsibility to be respectful of our peers and respect people because of what they do bring to the table, not because of any other potential benefits or heartache that might happen as a result of it.
I was just going to throw in, I think it might be in some respects, it is going a tiny bit too far in that, I've told the men that work for me and my husband and all the men on our board and stuff, it's not safe to ever tell a woman she looks nice unless you're married to her, she's your daughter, she's your mother. I mean, you can't say anything basically about how a woman looks, because if you tell her she looks nice, in reality, it's like, oh, I didn't look nice before, or
Exactly, you can't win.
You're never gonna win. You just don't go there. But it is two-edged sword in that women are still allowed to tell a man like, oh, I really like that tie, or you look nice today, and nobody seems to mind women doing that at this point. So men do have to be more careful in this age about that, especially older men. They're not used to editing what they say. So
Right.
I work with some men that are up into the 70s, and they will say totally inappropriate things. You just have to realize, they're going to retire soon.
That's right.
Just let them go in peace. But,
Yeah, so I do think that from a male perspective, it has forced me to think a little more critically about, right, so I'm going to extend your mirror analogy. So, I'm staring at myself in the mirror, and someone standing behind me looking at that mirror might see something different. So my wife has said the same thing, like, you have to be careful. You might ask someone, what they're planning for the weekend, and that's a completely innocuous question, but someone else might take it a different way, right? So I see myself in the mirror, and I see who I see, and you see a man not in control of his color fan. And I wouldn't have ever guessed that, but possibly that's what you're thinking. So I need to start thinking that, people could be making assessments about that.
So that's the benefit. I just made you all insecure, and that was not my goal. Sorry.
But yeah, so, just going that extra step to think, how could someone else have perceived the what I'm saying or how I'm behaving or what my body language is. They may be thinking that, they may not, but I think it's a mind-opening exercise to even think that way. So that's kind of been one personal takeaway for me.
No, I think it's valuable. I think it kind of slows us all down in our interactions. You can't assume anything. So it's kind of sad in a certain way, because I think that a certain amount of camaraderie and lightheartedness can be good in the work environment when we're all dealing with so much stress from clients or just from the decisions we have to make. So I think that ultimately this will all kind of work its way into a nice place. I'm going to be optimistic. It certainly improved since I was working. I had a situation, it's when I was fresh out.
I would tell you, when I worked in New York City and I was young, when I was the young woman on the audit and things like that, they would take me into strip clubs with the whole audit team.
Right.
The things they do, you would never do that now.
Never. I was always sort of my own boss, well, not sort of. I'm really an entrepreneur. I work for myself. Probably the same thing. I know what my standards are, and I didn't want to deal with the stuff. Before I became that, and I was in Bloomingdale's, and I was an executive there, I worked for the store manager, who was the VP of fashion, and the operations manager. And the VP of fashion asked me into his office one day and told me to come sit in his lab. He didn't even hide it. He just said it and laughed. I'm like, what? So it comes to the point where you have to have confidence to say, sorry, Charlie, that's not, you just have to say no. He's older, and I didn't respect it, and I didn't feel worse for it because I just laughed at him, and I walked away. So there's an art to dealing with, there's so much stuff that happens that you have to be prepared for, and it's a whole other conversation. But you have to stand up for yourself and be true to yourself and not get scared by bosses.
Another experience I'll point to is I think it helped me to be male with my career path earlier. It helped me develop camaraderie with my former boss, because when I walked in the door and he saw I was a man, he thought, oh, well, he must like the Miami Heat, oh, he
Right.
must like football. He actually said, oh, well, the Heat game's on tonight and they're playing on the road, so do you want to go to Hooters and watch the game and grab a beer? Like, the first day, like, I just met the guy. So that helped me, whether it's right or wrong, it helped me in my career. A metaphor I would point to is I had a biology teacher in high school who was retired, who was doing this pro bono, and she was a former professor at Boston University, and she was very involved with neuroscience and how the brain works and whatnot. And her husband needed open heart surgery, and she selected a surgeon who had a shaky hand. And she told the class this, and everyone gasped, why would you pick all the surgeons out there? Boston is so great in the medical field. Why would you pick a surgeon with a shaky hand? And she said, because think about what he had to overcome in order to get to where he was.
Whoa.
He must be a phenomenal surgeon. So that's what people should think about when they see someone like my current boss, who's the only female, to my knowledge, in the entire industry in the utility sell-side sector in the United States, is what did she have to overcome to get to where she is? She must be really phenomenal at what she does.
I like your attitude. So I think it's time I have to kind of wrap things up here. Does anyone have any other specific questions that we didn't touch upon that you would have hoped to have gotten answers for by coming tonight? Okay, if you have any questions, I'm sure the panel will be happy to exchange cards with you. I have my information up there if you have any questions about what I discussed, and I have cards. I'm happy to follow up with any of you. I think just to tie a nice little bow, what we've determined pretty much is that we as professionals all have to come into the workforce, the workday, transactions with the best preparation we possibly can in your field. Obviously, the CFA is important, and any other education that you can get to support it, that you want integrity, you want to show that you're committed to your field, and you want the benefit of having peers that you can rely on for this kind of situation, which I would imagine is pretty much invaluable, even tonight. So I would like you all to consider that when you're leaving, and also just to remember that going back to the virtuosity and that I talked about earlier, you have to be the best you are, but you also have to be sincere in what you're doing, or otherwise it will be lost to the people that you are interacting with. So I hope that we gave you information tonight. I really appreciate everybody, and I want to make one little housekeeping moment here. Robert Hellman Robert Hellman is on, you can find him on the CFA website, and he can help with career coaching and has a lot of contacts in New York in the finance world. So that's that. Thank you all again. I'm going to turn it over to my hosts.
We have just a few thank yous before you guys head out tonight. First of all, we want to thank the Office Depot Executive Education Center for hosting us in this space tonight. Special thanks there go to Belinda Millette and Robert Munoz. We would especially like to thank Andrea Greenspan.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Miriam, Christopher, Laura, Justin, Christina, thank you very much for participating and sharing all of your thoughts with us. Thank you all for coming. Please drive home safely. That concludes our programming for tonight.